The devotion of my professional life to the study of China was very much driven by my sense of the extraordinary transformations that were taking place in China in the 1980s as opening up and reform first took root. The extraordinary energy and excitement of the Chinese people was released in this period with obviously wonderful consequences for the Chinese economy, for the living standard of the Chinese people, for the global economy, and so it was a really terrific development. I think in recent years we need to realize that the period of opening up and reform is now, so opening up and reform was constituted in opposition to the period that preceded it, the period of the collective economy, the Mao Zedong period, and the reality is now that China has been opening up and reforming for almost as long as the Mao Zedong period, in fact longer. What that means is that I don't think opening up and reform is any longer a very meaningful term. When it's used today, it simply means, it's simply a synonym for China's overall policy. And I would have to say that China's policy in recent years has its strengths. It also has its weaknesses. There are many developments in China that I think are problematic, that worry me, that trouble me. But there are also continue to be many extraordinary changes in China. Ultimately, I am optimistic about this solution, about cooperation, not because I have concrete suggestions about how the two countries can work together, but because the benefits to the world of us learning to work together again are so enormous. And the risks to the world, if we do not work together, are so great. We will never be able to address the challenge of global health crises like the COVID pandemic. Perhaps even more seriously, we will never be able to address the biggest problem of our time, which is climate change, without cooperation. So ultimately, I'm optimistic because I think eventually people and leaders in both countries will have to realize the tremendous costs of not cooperating, of not getting along. Now, how do we get to the point of cooperation, of greater cooperation? I think we have to recognize that the early era of opening up and reform, of constructive engagement, those days are not coming back. They're not coming back because the world has changed. They're not coming back because China is in such a dramatically different position than it was in the 1980s. And I think it's foolish for us to try to reset back to that earlier level of cooperation across the board. There are many issues on which the U.S. and China will disagree. That's unavoidable. The challenge is to isolate the issues on which we can and should cooperate from the issues on which we can and must disagree.